now listening to the Motivational Jumpstart. Motivational Jumpstart. Motivational Jumpstart.
All right, welcome back to the Motivational Jumpstart right here on 91.7 FM WHUS Stores. All right, motivators, we're going to jump right into it. We have an incredible, remarkable guest in studio, and I'm so excited. But, we have to introduce her and our guest the right way. So in studio, we have the incredible Miss Shireen Ahmed, who is a writer, public speaker, sports activist focusing on Muslim women in sports. She is an athlete, advocate, community organizer, and works with youth of color on empowerment projects, and is an avid sports coach and mentor. She is a regular contributor to Muslimah Media Watch, a global sports correspondent for Safe World for Women, and works on the Muslim Women in Sports website. Her work has been featured and discussed in Sports Illustrated, Policy Mike, The Globe and Mail, Jezebel, Vice Sports, etc., etc. And she's just overall very purpose-driven and passionate. In studio, we have Miss Shireen Ahmed. How you doing this morning?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Shireen, like we like to do on the Motivational Jumpstart is have our guests tell the listeners a little bit about themselves and what makes you come alive. What inspires you?
I want to say what fuels me is coffee, but what actually gets me going is because of recognition that I have an opportunity to flip injustice on its head. And the way to do that, and a lot of the work that I've done is through sports. I love sports. I feel like they're a vehicle for good. I feel like they're a vehicle towards justice, towards anti-oppression work. And I mean, for me, that's really important. It combines both things that I love.
So take us back a little bit. Where are you from? What's a little bit of your story, and we're going to kind of organically work it, for the listeners out there. Okay,
well, I will be honest. I come from a time before the internet, and I was born and raised on the east coast of Canada. I grew up in a very small coastal city called Halifax, and I loved it. I moved to Toronto for university, stayed there. Was super involved in my university. I played for University of Toronto. I played soccer for them. And all these things that happen, I'm realizing now, are sort of what got, or there are things and elements of my life that were pieces in a puzzle. And they're still not completely clear of what that picture will completely look like. I'm still on my journey. But I started to wear a headscarf after my second year. And then the option of playing soccer wasn't there anymore. Not because there wasn't something that said that I couldn't, but there was no rule stating that I could. So I was like, okay, let's do something else. So then I was like, going to be undefeated. I was like, I'll do something else. I rode crew, which was amazing. Don't miss getting up at 3:30 in the morning, but that's okay, on Cold Lake, Ontario. But, I just kind of kept going. I got married soon after, had a family, and sort of was deciding, well, what do I do with myself? Like, what do I want to do? So working for women and advocating for women, marginalized women, was the biggest thing for me. I'd always considered myself a feminist, even though I didn't even know what that might mean, even though I was dissatisfied with definitions of what that could be. So then I decided to I got involved in a frontline social service agency working with newcomer women, refugee women, survivors of violence. And what I did is I used my training in sports and my coaching. I'd always coached and everything like that, and played. I decided to use sports as a therapeutic means to work with the youth. Mostly Muslim women of color, but we had anybody in our group. We welcomed anyone. And some things were great. Some things they really liked. They liked table tennis. They liked yoga. We're not big fans of cross country. Not big fans of rock climbing. Just some things worked better for the group dynamic than others. So I kept thinking, this is really interesting. And at the same time, the whole idea of what sports could mean and what people's experiences in sport were. There are injustices at different levels, and there's things that can be better at different levels. And I started to look at those, particularly because of my experience and my lived experience as a Muslim woman. I was reading a lot about hijab bans, and it didn't actually occur to me about my own experience. Because, I wasn't going to go pro. I played left bench. Let's be realistic. But what about the ones that could, and how come they couldn't play? So I started to examine this and research it and look into it. And I started writing about it. And then that became a full-time thing about 5 years ago, and sort of dedicated myself to working with campaigns that, pressed international federations to allow accommodation of uniform, just to sort of advocate for women in sports, different levels, different communities. I want to be supportive of other communities, particularly now in the world when trans athletes are facing so much discrimination from international federations. Like, what can I do to amplify their voices? What can I do to amplify voices of athletes and women of color, particularly in sport, from marginalized community, racialized communities, that helps them get access to sport like we all should have?
Wow, no, that's powerful. So you touched on a lot there, Shireen. So if we go a little bit back, what got you into soccer? Was this like a family, part of your family dynamic? You know, being in a small part of, what you said, Halifax?
Yeah.
Halifax, Canada, before, you know, moving. Like, what got you into soccer? Was that your first sport of choice? Was that just the big sport that was happening? And then when did you kind of start first observing, like, wow, these are some funny things that are happening just at an early age, me playing, that are injustices?
Yeah, I think that soccer for me was my first love.
Okay.
No question. The game made sense to me. It made sense. I never understood basketball and the rules thing, and I married a basketball player. So, and I was telling somebody it took me years to figure out what 3 in the key was, and like the rules always changed. I'm like, what's happening? And I still have big issues with taking the charge. Like, why would you stand there when someone's barreling at you? But whatever, that's different. Soccer just made sense to me. The freedom I felt on the pitch, finishing, putting the ball in the back of the net just made sense to me. I'm like, let's do this. I mean, when you're under 5, you're all like a bunch of bees following the ball. So there's no system, there's not much rhythm, it's not as dynamic, and there's no passing. But the idea that I could be a part of that, of a squad of people, like an extended community family, and I come from a background and understanding where community and family means a lot. So as opposed to the individual sport, I gravitated more towards a team sport. And that, it just absolutely made sense to me. And I remember I just said, I want this. I think my parents put me in because I had a lot of energy, and they're like, we need to tire this child out. They put me in everything, though. I played ice hockey, I swam competitively, I did a whole bunch of stuff. They put me in like volleyball just so I could try. And soccer is the one that stuck with me. And, you know, just being in a predominantly white place, I was the only young kid of color in my entire grade. Also, I went to a French school. So it was, I was just I felt different. And I couldn't figure out why. And, the first time I ever heard a racial slur was on the pitch. The first time I ever experienced racism. And it took me a second. I was shocked about it. And I think that when we think about sports, for me, as an outlet, it's a form of self-care. It's a form of me taking care of myself and wanting to do it. But it's also a place where I've experienced a lot of microaggressions and a lot of, racist abuse. I wouldn't say a whole lot. We didn't have throngs of people in the stands when I was playing under 14. It's not happening. But yeah, there's comments, there's whispers, there's parents making comments. So this is stuff I've all carried with me. I'm like, how do we stop this culture, this toxic culture? Like, how does it? And now that I'm a parent, I think about it a lot from a parent perspective too. Like, how do we not be jerks?
Right.
Because it's really that simple. Just don't be a jerk. I don't know if I can swear on your show or not. But
no, not a swear.
Okay.
Well, you can say jerk.
I could say jerks.
You can
okay.
say jerk.
So, just how do we do that? So, because the freedom and the love and the excitement and the adrenaline that gets kids pumping, gets youth pumping, gets adults pumping, that's something that is so encouraging people to get out there and get healthy and lead healthier lifestyles. But at the same time, balance and challenge systems of those oppressions that we see in sport as well. So, I love it, and I want everyone to have those opportunities.
Right. So this is happening. You're not really sure what microaggressions and things are, but you're seeing racial things come at you, on the pitch and whatnot. And was this like something, being shocked and being young, especially the time under 14? Was this conversations and you would go back with your family, and then they would help you dissect it and process it? Was that like a very open environment for you to feel comfortable to kind of make meaning of what was happening to you, being the only a person of color in class?
Yeah, my parents were very honest with me about what could happen. And as far as the first time I ever heard a racial slur, I think I was 11. I was 10. I was playing under 11. So I was quite young, and I reacted. Everyone reacts differently, and I reacted by punching the player because it was the only thing. It just was a visceral reaction. What happened was I ended up getting carded, and I ended up having, and for an under 11th player to get carded is like it's. So I was reprimanded and I missed 2 games, but because the ref hadn't heard what she called me, there was nothing that happened to her. Right. So that was another injustice on top of what I had experienced, and that made me angry. But that's actually was one of my first lessons in how these systems work. And I was 10. So I went home and I told my parents, and my dad's solution was just pummel her next time in terms of goals.
Right,
Just keep firing and get as many goals and humiliate her that way. My mother was a little more strategic because like we have to have conversations with people. So, you know, my dad also talked to me about Jackie Robinson. Mm-hmm. He gave me examples of people before me because there have been many, 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 many people throughout the years that have had this, that have used sports as a means to educate, to stand their ground, to literally be the athlete activists and stand up for something. And he's like, you're not too small, you're not too young. You have to know that this is going to be a part of your reality. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like families of color have these conversations with their kids. I mean, you have, you know, Indigenous communities in Canada and Black families in Canada talking to their sons about police brutality. Like, these are conversations that we have young. So this is going to happen to you, and these are your options. I had a lot of family support. Like, my parents were very supportive. No, punching was not the best necessarily course of action, but they didn't give me a hard time for it either. Like, honestly, they didn't. And they were supportive, and they understood my immediate reaction. But see, now as a parent, I get back and go, what can we do to educate other parents and other people? My coach had no idea to handle it. Mm-hmm. This was another issue. He had no idea what to do. So he had never had a player of color before and didn't know what to do with me and my feelings and everything else. So how do we train coaches to be able to handle this better? I mean, mind you, that was 30 years ago, but the idea is to provide people with information, provide them with education, so they know, and have them listen to people. It's because I carry that with me. I'm not going to lie, I don't think about it all the time, but there's moments where I'm on the pitch and I think about it. Because I was a lot less confident. I was a 10-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what did that have to do with anything? Where did she learn those words? Why did she think that using those words were okay? Like, let's go back, and these are things I think about now. And I have those conversations with my own kids. Like, we're not doing this, like, you know, those kinds of conversations. You can't do this. This is off the table, you know, and so they need to understand. I have 3 boys, mm-hmm. so we talk a lot about internalized misogyny and systems of sexism, mm-hmm. and understanding those. I talk to my daughter about things, and also, you know, because they're athletes, not to be ableist, to understand people have different experiences. Like, you have to be. It's not hard to be aware of other people's existences. That's all.
Right. No, and I think it's powerful for you, those 2 different dynamics, right? Growing up, being a 10-year-old girl, experiencing these things, right? Now being a proud mother, you know, we've had your breadth of experience, you know, and then trying to say, wow, okay, I had these discussions when I was young with my parents. My dad was, like, very honest and candid with me and said, mm-hmm. You're old enough, these are the things that you're going to experience. You know, it's going to be potentially different ways that you're going to handle and adapt to that. But this is like a real reality of society here, mm-hmm. you know, in Canada, but just globally. You know, I'm assuming that's what you know your father was alluding to. But then now, what you're doing with your kids, right, and doing that. So how do we begin to, within the work that you're doing, and we'll get into, you know, how the love for writing and all these other things. But how do we, in a very tangible way, knowing that these systems, Shireen, are just like so just continue to permeate hegemonic regimes, etc. How do we continue to educate coaches and people, especially in this competitive, I just want to win culture? In sports, like, how do we educate them to say, no, you do have different athletes and kids of different races, different nationalities, different religions, different faiths, all of these things that are going to be competing. You know, how do we make them say, no, I can be the best coach or the best parent when these things happen to intervene?
Well, I think it starts as simply as broadening what sports is. It's not just about competition, it's about development.
Right.
It's about enriching children. It's about giving them opportunity. It's about giving them experience. And what does sport mean to kids? It means some are super competitive. Like, I have a daughter who is very, very competitive, just naturally. I have an older one that's a little more chill. He's like, no, I'm just going to he plays basketball all the time, but doesn't necessarily want to, like, get up at 4:30 a.m. and do those workouts, mm-hmm. and do those things, and that's fine. So just understand that it's not the same for everyone. And in terms of educating coaches, it's super simple. Like, amplify those voices that are trying to be heard and say, listen, I want to be a part of this, but there's so much pushback to silence people, mm-hmm. and even to speak on their behalf, that this is what I think this person, like this young Black girl, is feeling, or this Indigenous girl is feeling. No, why don't you listen to them? Like, listen to kids, listen to their parents, listen to their family experiences. It's about amplifying others, and it's decision makers to sit down and stop talking and listen to other people. Because when you look at the heads of federations, be it local grassroots or be it international governing bodies of sport, it's men in the boardrooms.
Absolutely.
I'm not talking about just players playing, I'm officials, coaches. We need to have people at all levels making decisions in management, talking about structures, talking about development programs, and including people. It's not, and it's always this grab for power. But if you step back a second and say, listen, like some of the work I've done and the projects I've been lucky and fortunate enough to be a part of are, for example, I worked with young Syrian refugees when they came to Canada. They didn't speak English, and my Arabic is super minimal. What do they speak? They play football. They speak football. And that's what you use to get through to them, to give them a release, to give them an opportunity to feel young again, to help them through trauma, to help them understand that, you know, what it is there is similar to here. Although here it's cold and we're in a gym because it's January and it's Toronto, so we're going to play in a gym. But to give them opportunities and how that can reach them. Sports is a very natural way to communicate with people without verbal language necessarily. It's a tool of communication. It can be, if used properly, executed properly. And I think reminding coaches of that, because we're also in the United States and Canada and parts of Europe, it's so structured in a way with no flexibility. We need to be more dynamic at how we look at things. There's grassroots organizations out there. One, for example, is called Discover Football. There's Soccer Without Borders. There's, different, I know there's sitting volleyball that goes into different communities, disabled communities, and works with kids. And these things are really, really important. And to hear different stories, I'm a big story fan. Like, I like telling stories. I love listening to stories. And that's, I think, one of the key things. And in terms of how we do it, you're asking, we allow ourselves to learn from others. And I think generally in the sports world, we're so keen on how do I win or this is this thing. We forget a bit about other people's stories, and we forget that athletes are humans first. And you know, everyone has a different story, and sometimes listening to those are really quite harrowing and important.
Right. No, and that's so powerful, Shireen, because I think the level is exactly what you stated on. Taking out the element of competitive play, right? Just the development of kids. I just personally feel, as a avid sports, fan, and just love it to my core, studying it. We have totally, as a society, just moved away, being capitalism, etc. Right? Pay for play leagues, etc. And just kind of pricing out a lot of the kids' developmental skills. PE, physical education, is not what it used to be. When I was growing up. And I think that's the thing that I struggle with. And I think that's something that you said, no, with coaches, is like, no, letting voices be amplified, letting all of these things happen. But what is the real meaning of sport? Using it, right? What you're saying with the Syrian refugees, using football as a way to connect, right? Versus, hey, I'm trying to win. It's just crazy. I was telling someone the other day, just with PE, you used to just have regular PE coaches. They would coach a team. And it wasn't about getting fired. And now when I go back home to Louisiana or just across the country, PE coaches are getting fired because they want to win. And I say, wait, it's like 8th grade basketball and you're a PE coach, but you're fired because the team went 0-12. Like, what are we doing here in this level? But I feel like what you're saying in these boardrooms, you have a bunch of guys, men, referees, coaches, staffers, kind of walling the playing field and the rules and the regulations, being all of the decision makers, hungry for power. And your voice is not in the room. Persons of color's oftentimes voices are not in the room. But somehow logically this makes sense to them. And I think for me, as optimistic as I think you are within how you've been using sport, I feel like, is this seminars, is this trainings? Like, how are we going to get these coaches to really buy in when society is telling them you need to win at all costs?
Yeah, and let's just re-examine this group of kids, the Syrian ones. Don't get me wrong, those kids wanted to win. That little pickup game in that gym, they were playing like it was a World Cup final. Right. And at the end of every match, it was tears, and someone was acting like Ronaldo, being a crybaby, and everything like that. This was so inherently important to them, and I don't want to take that away. And don't get me wrong, I like to win. I play mini putt with my husband, and it's fierce because I want to win. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
But as far as going back to the boardrooms and stuff like this, I think that whole idea of people making decisions. But what does resistance look like, and how can that be used through sport? This is another thing. Sports is a means of resistance as well, and uprising. We know Dr. John Collis and Tommy Smith in '68, the fifth stuff. We know this. I mean, one of the first documented histories of a Muslim woman in sport was also someone who was anti-fascist. She was a Turkish fencer named Halet Kembat, and she was competed in the 1936 Olympics. She was in the stadium when Jesse Owens won the 100 meters, and Hitler went like berserk. He was furious and embarrassed, and because he didn't want a black man to win, because it completely disproved his theory, or his like racist and horrible xenophobic ideologies, and he asked to meet her, and she said no because I don't like your politics. Like, we see histories of resistance. So how do we push back? We've seen examples, like there's two American women, Muslim women, Indira Khalio and Bilqis Abdul Qadir, and they both pushed back against a hijab ban in basketball. And in basketball, there was no Muslim woman in the boardroom. In fact, in the executive committee, there's no woman. So why would men who implemented this ban care to change it? Because it didn't affect them. And that's exactly it. They didn't care to change it because it didn't affect them. So these two women started a change.org petition. They started reaching out to people. I found them, and I was like, I'm going to write about this. And, you know, in the process, the story started being shared. They got so much pressure, FIBA, that they actually did strike down the hijab ban last May, formally lifted it October 1st. So change can be made. And I mean, no, athletes don't necessarily go in thinking, I'm going to make change. And not all of them want to, and we don't want them to have that pressure. Like, we see some players have chosen to kneel in the NFL, some haven't. They're already out there trying to be their best. Do they want that added thing? But as people of color and people from marginalized communities, you don't get to separate your identity. You don't get to do this. Like Bilqis Abdul Qadir from Springfield said, I didn't go out. I don't speak, I don't write, but I didn't go out looking to be an athlete. I just went out to play basketball. That's what she loves. That's what she wanted to do. But in that process, because her journey was different, she was thrust into the spotlight. And I mean, she conquered it. She was amazing, but it wasn't necessarily what she thought it would be. And she had to fight for her right to play. And when you think about that, and what does that mean? And so the point is, you can rise up. You can win in this way too. Like competition, or to win something, to win access, to win opportunity to change policy. These aren't small things, because it also changes what the face of basketball can look like, away from like traditional male-dominated sport or whatnot, to really change. You know what? It can look like a black girl in a hijab, and it is. That's what basketball is. So like, why not change that? And that's what people have done. And I think that's one of the things of these boardrooms, how we infiltrate. We can use social media, we can use tools of community. Allyship is really important. Here, LeBron James retweeted Bilqis, and that was huge. This is LeBron. Like, this is no joke. And, you know, people you have, you know, we're at UConn. Breanna Stewart went to a protest when the travel ban came out in Seattle. She was at the airport protesting. Breanna Stewart wouldn't have been affected by a travel ban, but she was so compelled to go and stand there in solidarity. That's important. This thing isn't small. Allyship along the way is important. Teammates. Like, when I was 10 and I had this happen to me, I was sitting in the backseat of the coach's car on the way home, and I was humiliated. I was embarrassed because I had been penalized. My coach was furious. And we ended up missing the playoffs because we ended up losing the game 3-1 because we had to play short because I was ejected. And I carried that burden also. But I remember the girl sitting beside me, I didn't have any tissue. And like, my nose is running. Like, I'm not a pretty crier. I've never been a pretty crier. She just quietly handed me her shirt. Like, use it to wipe your face, because I didn't have an extra one. Like, I'm not going to expect a 10-year-old kid from Halifax to stand up for me and give it like a sort of soliloquy on why, you know, racial injustice is not okay. But she gave me her shirt because I needed it. And she was enough to show compassion. That's what we need to see. We need to see more compassion and humility in sports at those federation levels.
Wow. No, and it's powerful, and we do. So, you know, Shireen, as we kind of shift gears just a little bit. So, when did the love of writing, you know, and all of these things started inserting yourself into that world and being even more active and saying, outside of being a parent, and saying, you know what, I want my voice to contribute, you know, to continue to press and challenge people on the journey, you know, of injustices in, you know, the certain things that are continuing to oppress and penalize marginalized groups. When did that love for writing and you really started inserting yourself even deeper into politics?
I've always written.
Mm-hmm.
I've always sort of appreciated good writing. My dad was really keen that I read a lot, and I still do. And I wanted to hone that craft. I didn't think about doing it professionally because who's going to pay me to write about Muslim women in sport? Like, I'm sorry, it's not the most lucrative niche out there. But I didn't even think it could be something I could do. But when I started looking, and I did come at this with researching Muslim women in sport, but I realized the systems of injustice, of misogyny and racism and gendered Islamophobia, there's systems like that across the board. Mm-hmm. So there's parallels. I mean, I have a trans woman friend, and she and I talk about like fears we have for society, and she's a parent as well, and we have so many similarities. So within those groups, to reach out and connect with people, like I think that's what really made me think, oh wow. And I started a blog. 2012, I believe, I started a blog. It's kind of started as a rant. And I was thinking, okay, well, this is how I feel about soccer. And at the time, FIFA still had a hijab ban on, mm-hmm. and a team from Iran wanted to qualify for the World Cup, and they were kicked out of qualifications because they were wearing headscarves. And I was like, that sucks, and that's wrong. But no one was getting into why it was wrong. There was just this firm, no, this is not allowed. Okay, can we ask why? So I started to ask those questions. I came from a family, whether it was religion or politics, my parents were like, ask questions. So that's what I started doing. Like, I didn't intend to start reporting or investigative anything, but I had questions, and I wanted to know why. And there was no good reason why. Like, I spent 10 years looking for one documented case in any federation, soccer association around the world, saying that wearing a hijab would be dangerous for a player. How many do you think I found? None. Because they don't exist. Mm-hmm. Because if they did exist, FIFA would have said, oh my gosh, you're so dangerous, look at this case. It didn't happen. And I think that made me think, okay, there's something going on here. I just started blogging, and then my work got picked up, and I had people say, well, no one's going to care. And I remember thinking that. I was like, you know what, I care. And then met other people across different universities, academics, athletes, activists who actually really, really care. And issues of oppression in sports and doing that anti-oppression work is huge. It's much bigger than I thought. And me meeting academics that actually study this stuff, like a friend of mine, Professor Lou Moore at Grand Valley State, he researches these things. I'm part of a podcast called Burn It All Down, mm-hmm. and one of our co-hosts, and I couldn't consider my teammate, Amira Rose Davis. Dr. Davis is at Penn State. She's an associate professor of race and history. Mm-hmm. She talks about how black women playing roller derby in the 70s and what that did for their communities. Mm-hmm. And my mind is blown. I'm like, that's amazing. And these are stories that we need to share and know about as we move forward. Like, what did they do? How can we take their work? Before CAP was Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Mm-hmm. What did he do, and how do we learn from that? Bill Russell was talking about racial injustice in Boston in the 60s. Let's learn from that. These are our teachers. What are they doing? What are they saying, like in the 70s? And Bill Russell's formidable. Like, he's someone we should learn from. What did Ibtihaj Muhammad say? Like, what is Judy Chan saying? Castor Semenya? What are these people saying? And how do we band together to listen to what they're saying and move forward at youth sports levels? Like, we just saw, I think it was in Arizona, we talked about it on the show, a young girl, she wasn't allowed to play because she had her hair cut really short. We talked about it on the podcast, her name escapes me now, but, and she was 11, and there were, like, these ideas of what she should look like because she doesn't have long hair, so she's, she's happy with the way she looks like. So Ambi Wambach tweeted out to her and reached out to her and said, you know what, I have short hair and I love it. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't affect the way I play, and she's a world champion. So I think these things are important, and we extract joy and lessons where we can to move forward. And that's what I think, me writing and finding these stories and finding that there's huge pieces. Like, yes, I entered this field coming from a perspective of Muslim women in sports, but when you talk about the racism, misogyny, the xenophobia, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, there's so many intersections there. Mm-hmm. And so if I can help my own community and raise those voices, why wouldn't I help amplify others? So that's kind of what ended up happening.
Right. And that's powerful, Shireen. I think, growing up in your household, as the listeners out there, just growing up and having the experience at 10 and then still being, able to have these conversations with your family, which was critical engagement, right? Elevating your level of critical consciousness, and then continue to be pressed and encouraged to ask why. So why? Why? You know, I always loved little kids growing up, and I feel like the K through 12, I don't know how it is in Canada, but I feel like in America, you know, depending on what school systems you're a part of, you know, especially if you're not part of the more affluent, you know, in private or boarding school type systems, you know, you start as a young kid, and you're like, but Mom, why? Dad, why? Where do babies come? You know, you're asking all these questions, and slowly as you go through the school system, they just destroy your will to question reality, question systems, and it forces you to assimilate, you know, from that idea. You know, so you know, you're wearing a Colin Kaepernick jersey. You know, you talked a little bit about that, but even just the why, so many people miss. What we feel, and we've talked about, you know, here in stores, but just across the country. Like, do you know why he knelt? You know, so even though you're saying, like, you know, I know this has become this big pomp and circumstance and just charades out there in the world, but like, did anyone, are you all asking the pushback, you know, crowd, are you asking yourself, so why is he knelt? I mean, did he say why he originally knelt? So why are you getting distracted by all of these other things? You know, so I just think that. So what are your thoughts on that, and just the continued distractions as it comes to people who are amplifying marginalized groups and doing things, but then the machine, right, the powers that be want to try to distract and make it into something that it's not. Like, what are your views on that?
Well, I think one of the really important things that we see is that adults, like you're talking about kids K to 12 asking questions. So now I'm 40 and I'm asking those questions to like federations. People in power don't like to be questioned, and they're not used to it. So when you say, do you know why he knelt? They're going to be like, oh, he's disrespectful, he's disrespecting the flag. Do you know that he met with vets and then decided to take that physical gesture? Do you understand this? So they're being questioned, and they're embarrassed or probably ignorant about why. Eric Reed wrote an amazing op-ed in the New York Times as to why. Why did he choose to kneel with Cap? Why they physically took that gesture? Because it was a sign of humility and respect. That's why. It's a silent protest. So on the one hand, you have people going, oh, well, you can protest, but no, not like that. Like, what? What are you saying? It was the most quiet, peaceful protest ever. Nobody even noticed until a journalist had the foresight to say, hey, he's sitting or he's kneeling. Why is he doing that? And then it became, and then what I love is the movement that followed. I mean, Think Progress, my other co-host colleague, Lindsay Gibbs, out in D.C., has a tracker tracking the movement that Cap started. And this is a continuation. Like, athlete activism didn't start with Cap.
Absolutely.
And we have to recognize, he recognizes that. He knows that. And, you know, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has written about it, and we see this. Muhammad Ali is the most prolific athlete, activist of our time. People don't want to talk about his Islam. People don't want to talk about his blackness. People don't want to talk about he was anti-imperialist, anti-military, because it makes people uncomfortable. They want to whitewash all that stuff and say, no, he was pro-Palestine. People don't want to talk about that. It makes people super uncomfortable. But let's just talk about how he was a great American. Muhammad Ali was way more than just that. He was everything, and so was Cap. And Muhammad Ali was very clear and concise on why he was doing what he was doing. Cap is not shy. He says things that make people uncomfortable. In my line of work and experience, there is no topic that makes people uncomfortable like race does. Not issues of sexism, not issues of ableism, anything that makes people as uncomfortable as race. And I'm like, wow, because, you know, I'm a woman of color. And, you know, I identify as an intersectional feminist. People are like, no, people will come at me with this white feminism. I'm like, no, I'm not here for that. I'm not here for that. You don't get to speak for me or about me. Because, you know, and getting back to what Cap's doing, his movement and what he did was very honest. And in terms of people distracting, that's a common tool that people have. Like, let's talk about how he's disrespecting the vets. So you've got your 45, the Orange Menace, going on tweeting all the time instead of, like, you know, caring about helping people in hurricane-affected areas. He's tweeting about how it's disrespectful. No, it's actually not disrespectful, because you're trying to conflate the message. And people are taking the message of what's happening, of these athlete activists, and twisting it to, you know, to reach out to their other audiences that have no idea. If you listen to the man and what he's saying, powerful stuff. And you know what? It's not complicated either.
At all, it's not complicated. It's not complicated, and I think that's what grinds my gears every day. And my internal grapple is, you know, when it comes to people don't want to talk about race, right? I always feel like it's finances and race. It's like, nope, pineapples. We can't do this. We can't do this off the table. But especially when it comes to race, and my whole just counter argument, or just real argument is, can we just like Colin Kaepernick, just play the original tape, just his first interview, just that, and don't, doesn't matter who tweeted what, doesn't matter what CNN, Fox, doesn't matter, just go to YouTube, play his original words, and just hold those and guard them with all of your being, and somehow the smoke and mirrors still happen. And then we talk about race. Okay, no. Like Shireen is on the show and she has a story, has a powerful story, and it doesn't matter what you think happened at 10. She just said what happened at 10, and it was injustice. And although she viscerally reacted, but the rep, they didn't see it. The coach didn't know it, but she told her story. But no, that's what she deserved. She shouldn't have been playing. How could she? No. But listen, you know what I mean? And I feel like going to the root is what, when we have these ideals, right? Just global ideals, right? Do unto others that you want to be done to yourself. That's not happening, right? Be honest, right? Be truthful. So it doesn't matter what. That's what I've always heard you read. Just be true. Be honest. So we got to go to the root. Be honest. What are your thoughts?
I had a parent getting back to that thing when I was 10. I've been sort of re-examining it a lot. I'm writing a book, so I was re-examining it.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was really a poignant part of my life. A parent said that I disrespected the game.
Oh.
Yeah, by punching that person back. Never mind that she was the instigator, that this happened, that I had disrespected with violent conduct. And as a 10-year-old, that was really heavy for me because I love this game. I love the beautiful game. And so that was so much. And this is what's happening with Cap. They're attacking him and saying, you're a terrible American, or you're this, even though his truth has been so consistent. And he's saying the same thing that other people have been saying, like Dr. John Carlos, Mehmet Abdul-Rauf, and Ibtihad Haj Muhammad were in a panel a couple weeks ago. And they're saying the same thing. They come from 3 different experiences, 3 different communities, but they're saying the same thing that we're hearing over and over and over again in terms of this is about racial injustice. It's not about the military. Don't make it about that. Don't make it about disrespecting the flag because you're just distracting. It's the message is simple. And it's true, and it's his experience, and he's been, like, literally, it's the same thing over and over. That man has a lot of patience, if you ask me. And, like, in terms of people arguing, oh, well, he makes this much money, why should, he's also incredibly generous and has supported communities. Like, he's supported, the day after, I think, 45 cut funding to food programs, he donated $1 million, or no, not $1 million, I can't remember the exact number, but he donated a huge amount for grassroots food programs for underprivileged communities. And like he's coming back and he's bringing his money to the table and saying, no, I got that too, I can play this game. And he's also, one of the most powerful things that he's doing is he's empowering youth through education and knowledge. And that's how you fix this, and saying, yeah, I can help you with the sport. He's still training, he's in the best shape of his life because he wants to play, but he's also giving them more and saying, in addition to sport, you got to know this. And this is where I think getting back to how we coach better, we parent better, we support as a community better. Let's have faith in our kids. Cap has faith in our kids. He has faith in black youth. He's saying you are smart, you are capable, I'm giving you these tools. Let's do that with our youth. Let's say we'll give you an opportunity to do sport because y'all are gifted and you have talent, but let's give you also education. Let you be aware of what your rights are. Know how to eat healthy. Know how to access services in your community. Know how to, know what the constitutional and civil rights are. This is huge. And I think we don't respect our youth enough. And here comes this man that's just blowing everybody out of the water. And we're learning from him and going, yeah, maybe, I think I coach a little bit differently now. Like, I mean, one of the things for me, I coached for almost 10 years, I coached Muslim girls at a school for a soccer tournament. We had a season in the spring. The biggest challenge I had wasn't their rawness, lack of training, it was their confidence. Consistently, they were told that they were not athletes. They come from a society that doesn't think that they can be. That was my biggest hurdle with them. And I'd start every session saying, tell me what you're good at. Do you know how hard that was? To get these 16 girls to tell me what they were good at. They're like, well, and I was like, oh my goodness, they could tell me so fast what they needed to work on. Well, everyone has something to work on. But why couldn't they tell me that they're a fast runner, their passing is excellent, their accuracy is good? Like, something about yourself, my confidence, I'm supportive of my team. And this is what we do with our youth. And I think this is part of the system, and particularly in racialized communities. We don't tell our kids, we need to tell our kids that they're valued a lot more than they are, and all of society needs to do it. I mean, and the bravery I've seen from youth in kneeling. There's cheerleaders that are kneeling at Vanderbilt University now. There's kids as young as 8. And I mean, I wrote a piece about this for a parenting article about sports is actually a really cool way to talk to your kids about social justice. Explain to them. I mean, we saw Halloween, these adorable Instagram photos of little kids dressed up as Cap. It was beautiful. But also having conversations with your 7 and 8-year-old about why he's doing that. They're not too young. I had conversations about racism when I was 6. The first time I saw my mother get verbally abused, racially abused, I think I was 5, and I was watching it happen. So I was that young. I was in kindergarten, and she had a conversation with me, and there's others that have it earlier. So no, it's not. It's never too young to teach your kids about what goodness is, and what's right. They're never too young. No, I'll wait till they're 13. No, they would have figured it out on YouTube by the time they're 13. Have those conversations with them. Trust your kids. Teach them to be better.
Oh my goodness, I could sit here all day. We could talk and create an unofficial podcast, official podcast, a YouTube channel, Shireen. But for the essence of time, definitely. And this is just a snack, a sample, to the listeners out there, especially those that are in the Connecticut area, and especially the Stewart's campus specifically, who can hear Shireen, talk later, and share more of her story and the work that she's been doing. So. Just for that sort of time, what are some projects and things that you're working on? I know you mentioned a book. Is this kind of like a personal memoir? Is it deeper? Is it has a targeted purpose to it? What's a little bit about the book, and then we're going to wrap up kind of with your final words from there.
Yeah, I started out thinking it would be a little bit more research-based, but I think some stories are important, and my journey along and meeting other journalists and athletes and incredible people. It's going to be a sort of mishmash of everything, personal anecdotes and experiences and ideas I have and suggestions. It'll be me ranting about like white men and power structures for sure. That's absolutely going to be part of it, because that's kind of the essence of what I do. But I'm part of a podcast with Brenda Elsey, Amira Rose Davis.
Burn It All Down.
Burn It All Down, yeah. Jessica Luther and Lindsay Gibbs. And it's a feminist sports podcast.
Awesome.
And I think it's amazing, but I'm biased. And we basically talk about issues in sports from an intersectional feminist perspective. And I'm a freelance writer. I'm on Twitter ranting about something pretty shouty. I consider myself a shouty brown woman. I'm very proud of that. And that's what I do. And that's what I'm up to these days, keeping busy.
That's awesome. So I have 2 things for you, just 2 last things for you. Just to the students out there, just the listeners, right, that, want to get involved, be that, whites that want to just expose and educate themselves, to more of the things that are really happening and not staying in this bubble or box. Well, I'll start it there. Just to whites or people who are not in marginalized groups, right, who are listening and saying, well, some things I agree with Shireen, some things I don't, but I do want to become more informed. What would be just some things for you would inspire them, to say this is ways that you can, potentially become an ally?
Yeah, definitely. And just the first thing is, don't think that your opinion and your allyship doesn't matter. It definitely matters. And each grain of support adds up. Amplifying others. First of all, just listen to what people are saying. There's incredible resources at UConn stores. The Beyond the Field series is incredible. There's so much good work happening here. Listening to. Another thing is very simple, like reading the Players' Tribune. These are stories of athletes themselves. And I would also highly suggest diversifying where you're getting your sports news from. If you're not following at least 20 women of color sports journalists on Twitter, you're doing your sports wrong. And I actually, just because I did, I started compiling a list, which I'm happy to share with people, and I give it to institutions and to editors. It's just a compilation of women and non-binary people of color in sports media, because their perspectives are interesting, their ideas and the way they present things are different. So that's what I would definitely suggest. And grassroots, there's so much work to be done. Grassroots, financial aid, amplifying people. If you don't think you can, donate money to a cause. Soccer Without Borders, or a women's shelter that's helping amplify projects in cities for youth. There's so many ways to do things. Get involved, volunteer time. If you don't have money, I totally understand. Volunteer time, it's very valuable. Get involved in different projects, retweet something, send an email to your local or government representative about those things matter. Make phone calls, So those kinds of stuff, and start reading from different places. I think how we get our news is a big part of this too.
Definitely. Then the last one I have, well, no, it's I guess now, gonna take it. It's two more now, for real, Shireen. So then it would be just two, Muslim women out there on this campus, have definitely, experienced certain racial incidents, etc. Or just, those in Storrs campus or just around who can say, hey, these are ways. If something happens to you, speak out, share this information. Don't follow this those students who are persons of colors who want to be empowered, but might be experiencing things right now, but don't quite know how to grapple with it.
Well, everyone experiences those traumas in different ways, and some people are comfortable speaking out about it, and some aren't. But if they have a system of support, like reach out. If you know someone else has gone through something, be there for them. If they choose not to speak about it, like I had a lot of people I worked with that don't want to talk about their experiences because we're not ready. We have to support that decision too. I mean, I would love if everybody spoke up, but not everybody's in that place, and that's important to realize that survivors act differently. Now, in terms of, racialized women and there's a lot of women of color that are abused, and they're not even Muslim. One of the first women last year that was abused in Toronto, it was cold. Everyone wears a scarf in Toronto in February because it's cold. Doesn't mean you're Muslim, but she was abused physically. Someone pushed her, attacked her, because they thought she was Muslim. And so in those situations, people are like, whoa, support different communities, and even on campus, the different communities. There's issues within these communities as well that they have to be more supportive of women generally and what they're going through, and have a place for them to talk if they want to. Like these are like even violence against women centers, helplines. They're not small feats. They're really important, and people don't understand how sometimes they save lives. And if you reach out to someone and show solidarity, and if you see somebody, and I don't expect everyone to get involved if someone's being attacked. Like not everybody's in the same place and can, but if you can help, it makes that person feel less isolated. Because if you survived some type of abuse or trauma, feeling isolated is the worst. And knowing that you have outlets and people you can turn to. So if you see someone else that's going through that, reach out to them and say, well, and even if you don't think you have the tools, kindness goes a long way.
Yeah. It does. And now the last one that I have for you, Shireen, is just what is the personal mantra for life that you live by, quote, last mantra or just words of advice for people out there to continue to fight the good fight, continue to find their why, continue to just be who they're destined to be. What would those words be?
Well, I have this quote I love of Audre Lorde, and she's amazing, and it's just specifically saying that my self-preservation is self-care is an act of self-preservation, and that is political warfare. So taking care of yourself throughout these journeys, because this stuff is heavy. I mean, I love what I do, but like writing about misogyny and racism can be a pretty heavy beat. So, take care of yourself too. Put on your own mask before you go out. My friend Shakea Taylor told me that. She's like, put on your own mask, baby, before you go out and face the world. Take care of yourself and recognize that you are important and powerful, and you do need to take care of yourself, and then you can help the rest. So self-care is huge, and keep up the allyship with everybody else.
Definitely self-care is the best care. You've heard it right here on the Motivational Jumpstart. Definitely want to thank Ms. Shireen Ahmed for coming in studio. Quickly, we'll have one of our folks from Beyond the Fields, Ms. Sophia Reed, to come to the microphone and just tell you a little bit about the lecture this afternoon that's happening on campus. Sophia?
Hello. So we'll be in the ITE building, room C80 at 6:30 p.m. There'll also be a reception in the Asian American Cultural Center, which is on the 4th floor of the Student Union, starting at 5. So we can hopefully have a longer discussion with Shireen and kind of continue some of the questions and learn how to be a better ally and advocate and how to use our voices for good. So we hope to see you there.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Sophia, for that information. So the lecture is today. I definitely want to thank Ms. Shireen for coming in studio. We look forward to her lecture this afternoon. To the motivators out there, continue to be the change that you wish to see in the world. Continue to get involved. Continue to get engaged. And continue to just expose yourself to all the amount of information that's available to you. Your smartphone is bigger than should be used for more than just Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram. Get on some other sites and start expanding your mind. But for the Motivational Jumpstart, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week. The motivation will continue to happen. And for 91.7 FM WHUS Stores, we are out.